Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I have been getting quite a few questions lately, so I wanted to create a video that answered kind of the top Camino questions that I get. So without further ado, I'm just going to jump right in. Probably the biggest question that I get and that I've seen actually in forums is the Camino safe for solo female travel? And unequivocally, I believe that it is totally safe. I walked on my own completely for about the first 8 days, and it took me that long to kind of find people. Not that I was seeking out people to find, but it just so happened that I developed these great relationships with some other pilgrims. And I have to say, I never felt alone. Although I was alone, I never really felt lonely and I never felt vulnerable. I have seen some people wonder about whether or not they should bring, I want to call it bear spray, but I don't think that that's what mace. Yes, mace. Sorry, I live in Canada, so bears are a thing. So bringing some sort of mace or having, something on you to protect you just in case. And maybe I'm naive and too much of an optimist, but I never thought to bring any of that stuff, nor did I feel that I was missing it when I was walking. The reality is that the spirit of the pilgrims on the Camino is, in my opinion, pretty pure. People are interested in helping you if you're pulled over to the side and you're fiddling with your feet. Generally speaking, everyone wants to help. I don't think that the Camino really attracts the kind of person that is out to do harm to anyone else. Now, I do know that if you go looking for stories of women in particular who might have either been attacked or led down the wrong path, you will find them. But I don't think that you should spend your energy doing that. I really don't. My experience was walking along the Camino Frances. I have heard a few situations of people walking the route from Porto, where they might have felt a little bit more vulnerable, and perhaps it's not as trodden as the Frances path. But definitely, I believe that it's safe completely. A lot of my friends here back home were kind of weirded out by me just going. And to me, the Camino is the kind of place where you truly can pick up and just go. So hopefully that kind of puts that one to bed. You do want to have your common sense with you. I would say if you're going to spend a lot of your time walking at dark, maybe make sure you're leaving with other people. But these are all common sense things. And if you bring poles, I mean, there's something else that can maybe make you feel not quite as much of a target. But in actuality, it's completely safe. I'll probably edit this segment. So second is a practical question. It has to do with socks. I want you to know that I experimented a lot with socks before I left on the Camino. And I actually landed on my favorite situation it's a miracle I still have these because you know how socks tend to get lost in your house. So these are my Aninji toe socks. Aninji. I loved them. I at first would wear another pair over top of them in a kind of layering situation, but my feet would overheat, and so I learned to just kind of wear them on their own. I didn't have any problems with my feet. I had one tiny blister towards the end, but otherwise, this was the extent of my foot care. Wearing an Inji toe socks, no Vaseline. I didn't use Compeed. Those little toe condom things I borrowed from my friend Karina once. And otherwise, my real foot issues had to do with Achilles pain and the bottom of my feet were tender. But in terms of blisters, if you get the right socks and you practice before you go on the Camino, you should have no real issues. So I wore these. I would trade them actually with some right socks, which are double lined. And sometimes I would wear these 2 days in a row. I know that's kind of gross, but that's what I did because I only had one pair of these. So highly, highly recommend the toe socks. You do have to wear them and get used to them because it is an odd sensation having your toes all splayed apart. So the next question I get often is, do I bother to bring poles? Should I just get a walking stick or should I not bother with any of those? This is my personal experience, guys. I came with poles. I am an experienced, well, not even that experienced. I've done a lot of mountain climbing treks in my past, for which we've always had walking sticks or trekking poles, if you want to call them. So for me, it was a no-brainer. I was definitely going to bring my sticks. I wasn't worried about having to pay the extra airfare or whether or not they would be checkable in my bag. I didn't worry about any of that stuff. I just knew I want to bring mine. I like them. They were expandable. And I knew kind of how they fit with my body. So initially along the Camino, I definitely relied on them a lot, especially the first 4 or 5 days, I would say, where the terrain is kind of hilly and rocky and you've got that unstable Roman road type pathway. I used the poles like they were my lifeline. In fact, I swore by them. Sometimes I was walking on them, not walking on them, but using them almost like crutches, I would say. Towards the middle, when we got into the Meseta, I still used them a lot. And then gradually, I guess I just got more confident and stronger and realized that I didn't really need them. So I did end up carrying them all the way to Santiago. But I'll tell you, I left them in the airport on the way home on purpose. And I feel kind of silly about that. I could have donated them somewhere, but my intention was to bring them home and to obviously use them again because I don't want to waste my money and I've had them for years. But I just didn't feel like paying the money to cart them home, and I was kind of done just with schlepping stuff in general. So I left them in the airport. I just walked away from them. It was kind of symbolic, actually. So in terms of whether or not you bring poles, I would suggest that don't leave Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port without some sort of a stick or walking sticks or poles, and then decide if they're really not your jam as you go on. For me, I love them. Okay, another question. If traveling overseas, should I spend an extra night in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port or Roncesvalles or wherever it is that you're starting from? I will tell you, it was my plan to spend an extra night in Saint-Jean, but due to a number of unforeseen travel circumstances, my flights were delayed by 2 full days. And as a result, I was already down for the count and the clock had been ticking when I started my Camino. So I arrived in Saint-Jean at 6 o'clock and I left the next morning at 7:30 to start my full Camino. Looking back, I did struggle quite a bit with jet lag. This time difference is 6 hours from my Eastern Standard Time zone here in Canada to the time zone in Europe. And I didn't sleep at all the first night in Saint-Jean, even though it was comfortable and I stayed at an Airbnb and wanted to give myself the best shot at feeling rested. Just the adrenaline and the excitement of getting ready to start this journey really kept me from kind of settling in. So the jet lag hit me, I would say, from on the walk from Zubiri to Pamplona. That was a real struggle for me. I felt like I was hit by a Mack truck. And I ended up going to a pharmacy in Pamplona, just like this. And they're probably very used to pilgrims looking like this. The woman there gave me some sort of, it was like a natural sedative sleep aid, I think. I don't remember what it was called, but I took it that night and slept soundly all the way through. I think I got 10 hours of sleep because I went to bed really, really early when I arrived in Pamplona. So my recommendation, back to the original question, is if you have the time and can afford to spend an extra day from a time perspective And I guess from a money perspective, I would stay 1 day longer, either in Biarritz or Saint Jean. They're both very cute, quaint towns. There's lots to see and do. So much of the Camino excitement is already in the air when you get there. So I think it would be advisable. And although I didn't do that because Air Canada, yada, 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 I mustered through. So if you don't have the time, it's totally not the end of the world. Okay, another question I get. What was the single greatest takeaway from your Camino experience? And that one is really challenging to answer because there were just so many wonderful life lessons. Probably for me, the greatest lesson was seeing the acts of faith kind of in real time unfold. So it's difficult to explain, but I will try. People who go in the Camino talk about a certain kind of Camino magic. And what they mean by that is things just kind of happen and you can't script them, and you can't even almost quite believe it, but it's very strange. I'll give you some examples. Maybe you're walking, and you've been walking for a couple of hours and you've run out of water and you just kind of feel like you're really struggling, and you turn a corner and there's a water fountain with cold, flowing, potable water that you can drink. That kind of stuff happened all the time on the Camino for me. Or I would be thinking about a person and he would just show up like on the path. So for me, what I extracted from that was this lesson of just believing that what's supposed to happen will happen, and that I'm not always in control of the situation. That was kind of the theme of my Camino. I just went with no expectations and I wanted to see what would unfold. And what unfolded was this wonderful realization that things just work out, right down to feeling like you're not going to get a bed, or that you're not going to get any sleep. Something always works out. And if it doesn't, there's a reason. So for me and my personality, that was the greatest gift that I could have been given. I do tend to be a control freak, and I like to orchestrate things to my benefit. But with the Camino, I really just tried to let the universe unfold. And it was a huge spiritual piece of my growth along the Camino. Another question, how much preparation do I need? So I will tell you that it is my opinion, if you have the right sized backpack, the right attitude, the right shoes, and the right socks, I think you can just kind of show up and start the Camino. I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for that, but I am just telling you how I feel. The Camino is a very long walk, and you walk at your own pace, and you choose where you want to lay your head at the end of the day. I know there are many guidebooks and there are stages and recommended places for you to stay, but if you have the luxury of time and you're not under the gun, then you can just take the Camino kind of as it comes, which I think is a real gift. You don't need to be stressing about how much you've trained and this, that, and the other thing. Having said that, I'll tell you my personal experience in terms of preparation. I tend to be a gatherer of information. So before I went on the Camino, I read every single Camino book I could get my hands on, from ebooks to actual real books. Incidentally, this is one of my favorites. It's by a Canadian author, What the Psychic Told the Pilgrim, by Jane Christmas. Great book. Just thought I'd throw that out there. So I read a lot. I also watched a lot of vlogs, and I just was kind of a sponge soaking up information because I was partially excited, and I also wanted the information so I would know what to expect. Looking back, I would say that I probably overthought and over-researched to the extent that when I was walking along the Camino, although there were surprises, I sort of knew what to expect along the way. And I think it would have been even greater gift if I had not been so entrenched in finding out, well, what's this stage going to look like, and what does this town have to offer? And it's very difficult to take a step back if you're excited and a planner. And I recognize the hypocrisy of me saying, try to plan less. But I'm just telling you my experience. In terms of physical preparation, I did start probably 2 months in advance. Living in Canada, there's a lot of snow and cold in my particular city, and I left at the end of April. So in around early March or so, I would start doing my long walks. And for me, a long walk was anything more than 10K. I tried to fit in a couple of 15, 17 kilometer walks. I did the best that I could with that. It's tricky when you have kids and a schedule and you're a chauffeur and all of that good stuff. But that did really help me prepare in terms of what socks and footwear I should bring. And I could tell how my body would react. Like my knees would start to get achy and cranky after about 12 kilometers. So that was really the extent of my preparation. Not that long. My physical preparation, a couple months. And I would say I didn't go crazy or anything in terms of training for it. I am a fairly fit person, so I don't want to mislead you. The Camino is challenging, but I think it's hard to prepare for that degree of walking in advance. You just kind of have to start doing it. And in many circumstances, I think that your body becomes trained and conditioned as you go. So I also get asked, what is the most useful item that I packed? And classic Sam, I can't just say one thing. So the most useful item that I packed, actually I didn't even pack it, I bought it, is this butterfly scarf. Actually, I still wear it a lot here back home. I like it. It's kind of my little signature piece. I bought this scarf in Burgos for €1 and I loved it. I wore it all the time. I wore it like, as one of these when the sun was just bothering me. If I was sitting out having a sangria, I wore it around my shoulders to protect my arms from the sun. I just wore it everywhere. I wore it for warmth. I even used it to act as a bit of a divider with the bunks. It's see-through, so it was really just, a psychological barrier. Definitely advise you to bring a scarf that you love or to plan on buying one. This one spoke to me. It had butterflies on it. I love the idea of feeling like a butterfly and going through all those stages of metamorphosis and change on the Camino. So I think that's why I gravitated towards this. The scarf was amazing. But truly, and this thing is filthy right now. It's totally filthy. I really need to wash it. But the greatest thing I brought was this Tilly hat. This was my hat. I wore it every single day. Loved it. Wouldn't change it for the world. I could squish it up, throw it in my bag. I'm 99.9% sure that I prevented myself from getting skin cancer a lot by wearing the Tilly hat. So I saw a lot of people with baseball hats. I saw a lot of people with sun visors. My friend Karina, who I met along the Camino, wore a visor. She's pretty hardy. She's from Australia and used to that sun. I'm a pasty white Canadian girl and I wanted full protection. So if you have a Tilly hat, I would highly recommend that you bring it. Okay, addressing the common fears on the Camino. So there's sort of 4 that I wrote down here. One is finding a bed. I'll just go over them. The other is no beds. The third is bed bugs. And the fourth is foot care. So finding a bed. There's a lot of chatter and talk about finding a bed on the forums and whether or not beds are available. And I myself personally lived through this on the Camino. I was trying to do the whole romantic, just walk and let things unfold, as I alluded to earlier. But sometimes that wasn't practical. And so a few times, I remember in Pamplona, I went on a bit of a booking tear and I booked the next 3 nights in advance. I just used booking.com. I also looked at the folded piece of paper that the Pilgrim's office in Saint Jean gave us, which listed all of the albergues and donativos. And I would call them and ask in my very broken Spanish if they had availability and would consider holding a bed. I found that most places were totally amenable to holding a bed, but you needed to arrive by 3. And so if it was looking like I was going to be missing that deadline, one place specifically would have been, I think, Los Arcos. I was running late and I found that long stretch. I think it was 13K where there was nothing. I really dawdled. So I was worried that they weren't going to keep that bed for me, but I called them and they said, thanks for calling. We'll hold it for you. So finding a bed, if you phone ahead, I don't think you're going to be disappointed. Bed bugs. I didn't see one. I never had one. I never sprayed my stuff. I didn't worry about bed bugs. So I don't know if that's a whole, a philosophical conversation around you can attract into your world that which you talk about or think about all the time. But it didn't seem to be an issue. I also didn't run into anyone who had any sort of encounter with bed bugs. I see a lot on the Facebook forums with people who've had a different kind of luck, and I'm not taking anything away from you guys. It's terrible, and I wouldn't want to have dealt with that. I'm simply telling you that for me, I didn't worry about it, and as a result, or not, or it was just a coincidence, there were no bed bugs. Most places that we stayed in were extremely clean, very hygienic, really sanitary. So not that they would be immune to bed bugs, but it wasn't an issue. Foot care. So I did touch on this earlier. I'm going to post a couple of pictures while I'm talking. Your feet are your number one priority when you're walking. Nothing else really matters because your feet are your motor. I guess your heart and your body is the engine, but your feet are your motors. I might need to think that one through. I'm not a mechanically inclined person. Anyways, you need your feet to be in top working order. So my advice with your feet is, number one, there's a lot of walking on uneven pavement and Roman roads and gravelly areas where your feet are sort of, you're on an angle and you're really kind of walking on them in strange ways. So for that reason, I recommend that you get a shoe that has some ankle support. I went with the North Face Hedgehogs, and they weren't super high, but they had enough ankle support that I felt like I was kind of really locked and loaded in my shoes. And what I would do every night, as crazy as this sounds, after I showered, is I would rub my feet with Voltaren. So that's supposed to be for sore muscles and achy joints, but I spread that shit all over my feet. I'm just telling you. And my feet smelled like old men because of the Voltaren. But I don't know if that worked. To me, I never really had any concerns. I would also stop probably every 3 or 4 hours and just rub my feet. The balls and the heels were really tender, so I would just kind of massage them for 5 or 10 minutes, and that really seemed to help. Other things that I would do, I changed my socks whenever I could. So I already told you I only had one pair of the Aninji socks. But usually I would try and start my day off with the Aninji socks, and then I would switch over to my extra right socks, or I think I brought 2 extra pairs of right socks, just in case my feet were starting to sweat or get hot or wet in any capacity. I wanted them to be dry. So we would always talk about time to change our socks. And that was one thing that I did do proactively. I didn't do Vaseline. I didn't do, what other methods have I heard of? I guess Vaseline is the big one. Just the toe socks worked for me. And I also did take ibuprofen, which probably was a contributing factor to some of my stomach woes, but the ibuprofen I found really stopped kind of the achiness. When you're walking on the trail, it takes maybe half hour to an hour for your feet to kind of warm up, where you feel like yesterday's pain is totally gone. So it's always a bit slow going and kind of painful, but then once you get going, you actually get into a rhythm and you feel pretty good. So last question I wanted to address, digital items. So for me, I was pretty minimalist in terms of what I brought with me. I had some what do you call these things? Earphones? Headphones? Oh my God, get it together. I can't talk. I used my iPhone 8 to take my video footage. I did run into some storage issues, which was disappointing. I bought this thing called an iBridge Leaf, Leef, I believe, which is a little portable drive that goes into your phone, and you can transfer all of your videos to that. It didn't actually really work for me, and the little bit that I was able to transfer over is now gone because I lost the Leaf. So yeah, that was a smooth move. So storage issues aside, I ended up deleting all of my my iTunes and my songs, and I deleted a lot of old kid stuff, which I kind of have semi-mixed emotions over because I wanted to make room for taking new footage. So I would advise you to look at getting a portable drive, or just make sure that your phone is as empty as possible. Delete all unnecessary apps, and make sure that what you're saving actually is really meaningful to you. I had a lot of footage of like sheep and horses, and I like animals, but for me, I don't need 12 videos of sheep. So other digital items that I brought, I definitely recommend a battery pack. Mine was good for 4 full charges. I also had an adapter so that I could charge my battery, my iPhone, and listen on my earphones at the same time if I so wanted. And beyond that, that's it. I didn't bring a tripod. I didn't bring one of those selfie sticks. It was just Sam's arm, which is why a lot of my footage is shaky. I didn't bring an iPad. I didn't bring a laptop. I just wanted to keep my gear as minimal as possible because I tend to lose things, as illustrated by the missing Leaf drive. And I didn't want to risk bringing something that was A, going to be heavy, and B, possibly lost. One other tip I'll share with you is don't wear jewelry and don't bring rings. So when you're walking a lot, your hands and your fingers tend to swell. And there was one girl on the Camino that had to have her ring cut off. That's just a waste, in my opinion. I didn't bring my wedding ring. I left that at home, and history has shown on one of my last treks in Nepal, I took my wedding ring and my grandmother's engagement ring off, wrapped it in a Kleenex, put it in my jacket pocket thinking I would get it later, and then threw out that Kleenex. So I totally did that. Yes, I'm a complete idiot. So don't bring a lot of jewelry. I also didn't want to have to worry about anything. I have some nice earrings that I tend to wear all the time. I didn't want to be worrying about whether or not, they were going to stick out and someone was going to potentially go after them. Again, the Camino is very safe, but why take any unnecessary risk? So those are my tips. I hope you found this helpful. I'm going to edit it way down, and if you have any more questions, please feel free to shoot them my way. Just as a reminder, I am giving a talk on November 16th from 3 to 5 p.m. at my local church. It's called Talking the Walk. It's a free talk, not trying to make any money from this. I'm just an enthusiastic pilgrim who wants to share. I will be focusing on what worked, some things that didn't work, a lot of the epiphanies that I ran into along the way. I think I only mentioned one life lesson there. And I'll be focusing in on why I think that the Camino is completely accessible for really anyone of any ability. If you don't live locally, it will be taped and put up on YouTube, so not to worry. Hope everyone has a great day, and I wish you all a buen Camino.